Obviously, the college football playoff bracket has now been announced, and we now have 12 teams that are going to try to fight it out for the national championship. They will not be able to do that without having good quarterback play, so today I'm going to introduce you to the starting quarterbacks for all 12 playoff teams. We're going to go through who they are, how good they've been this season, and my thoughts on them. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you can support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's go ahead and get started and meet the starting quarterback for every team. Okay, so coming in at number 12 for the James Madison Dukes, we have to talk about Alonza Barnett III. He's definitely super underrated, as he comes out of Grimsley High School in Greensboro, North Carolina. That is the same school as 2026 5-star quarterback Faison Brandon, who's going to Tennessee. Barnett was quite the opposite, as he was actually not ranked in the 24/7 Sports composite, but was the number 179 quarterback according to 24/7 Sports. He had committed to JMU over Army, Charlotte, Georgia State, and Miami of Ohio, but it wasn't because he didn't have good numbers. In fact, he was actually pretty good while he was in high school. His dad also played in the NFL and at North Carolina A&T, and Barnett would arrive at JMU as a part of the class of 2022. Barnett would play sparingly his first 2 seasons before taking over as the starter in 2024. He threw for 2,598 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 4 picks, and returned to start for Bob Chesney this year. In total so far, he's thrown for 2,500 yards with 21 touchdowns and 8 picks, but has ran for 544 yards and 14 touchdowns. In 2 years, he's passed for 5,200 yards and 47 scores, and has ran for over 1,000 with 22 touchdowns. Barnett is a great dual-threat quarterback, and it'll be interesting to see how he plays against Oregon's defense. At number 11, we have Jake Rzoff, who also has a very winding journey to getting to this point. He ended up going to Centennial High School in Corona, California, and after passing for 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns, he didn't get much film. That combined with everything going on in 2020, he'd have to go to Golden West College. After going there, he would throw for 3,300 yards and 23 touchdowns, and then at Riverside City College, he threw for 4,596 yards and 44 scores. He ended up becoming a good JUCO quarterback coming out of the portal, and would start at the end of the 2023 season for the BYU Cougars. He ended up throwing for 648 yards and 3 touchdowns, and then took over as the starter in 2024 over Gary Bohannon. In total, he threw for 2,947 yards with 20 touchdowns and 12 picks. BYU got off to a great start, but folded in the last few weeks and would miss the playoff. After breaking some BYU rules, he would then decide to transfer late this summer and pick Tulane. So far this year, he has thrown for 2,862 yards with 14 touchdowns and 6 picks, but has done a lot of damage on the ground, running for 610 yards and 16 scores. Rzoff is one of the best quarterbacks in the American, and now has a chance to upset Ole Miss in the first round with the Green Wave. It's also ironic that Tulane made it, but not BYU. At number 10, as the quarterback for the Miami Hurricanes, we have Carson Beck. You've been hearing about this guy for a long time in college football, but going back to his time at Mandarin High School in Jacksonville, he threw for 3,500 yards and 30 touchdowns as a junior, and became Mr. Football in the state. After originally committing to play baseball at Florida, he'd end up committing to Bama before flipping to Georgia. Beck would not play much his first 2 years on campus, but would take over as the starter in 2023, throwing for just under 4,000 yards and 24 touchdowns. In 2024, his numbers fell off a bit, throwing for 3,400 yards and 28 scores, but he had double the amount of interceptions, and he had a couple bad performances. Instead of going off to the NFL, he'd get paid to go to Miami for his final year, and this season, he's thrown for 3,072 yards with 25 touchdowns and 10 picks. This has been one of his better seasons so far, and we will see if he can help upset Texas A&M and if he's really worth the money he was paid. For the Alabama Crimson Tide, who are the 9 seed, we have to talk about Tai Simpson. He's been a big name for quite some time in the football world, as he was a 5-star recruit coming out of Westview High School in Morton, Tennessee. His dad was on staff at UT Martin, and he became the Tennessee Gatorade Player of the Year after throwing for 2,800 yards and 41 touchdowns, and running for 862 yards and 11 scores. He was the number 1 quarterback in the class of 2021 at one point, and ended up committing to Bama over Clemson. Simpson didn't play much his first 3 years in college though, as he did not throw a touchdown in his first 3 years. He ended up winning the starting job in 2025, where he got off to an incredible start, throwing for 3,200 yards and 26 touchdowns. Unfortunately, he's had a couple of bad performances in recent weeks, and some are saying that he already passed his peak. Some are also saying he's going from a top 10 pick to maybe coming back to school next year. But either way, Simpson is a good quarterback and has been better than expected this year, but needs to show up in the playoffs. The guy he'll be facing off against is John Matir. He was a little-known quarterback recruit coming out of Little Elm High School in Texas and was actually considered the number 124 quarterback in the nation. He was not much of a big deal, as originally he was committed to Central Arkansas before he flipped to Washington State because of offensive coordinator Eric Morris. He had discovered Matir after he had thrown for 2,500 yards in one season, and in total had over 7,000 yards in his career. After sitting behind Cam Ward, Matir would end up blowing up in 2024 at Washington State, throwing for 3,139 yards and 29 touchdowns. He also ran for 826 yards and 15 scores, and he became a hot commodity in the transfer portal, and he would end up at Oklahoma. He was given Heisman potential hype, but unfortunately this year he's been a mixed bag. He has thrown for 2,600 yards and 12 scores, and he's ran for 7 more, but he had that hand injury, and he's not lived up to expectations. He's not been bad, but he needs to improve. Also, I don't know how much of a factor that injury actually played, but Matir has tons of talent. Up next, we have another SEC quarterback in Marcel Reed. Like a lot of these other guys, he was highly recruited coming out of high school, as Marcel went to Montgomery Bell Academy High School and was a part of the class of 2023. In fact, he was listed as the number 20 quarterback in the nation, and after originally committing to Ole Miss, he would flip to A&M after throwing for 6,400 yards and 62 touchdowns with 2,300 yards and 38 scores on the ground. Reed would play in their bowl game in 2023 before taking over halfway through the 2024 season due to Connor Weigman struggling. He threw for 1,900 yards and 15 touchdowns with 7 more on the ground, and so far this year, Reed has passed for just under 3,000 yards with 25 scores and then about 500 yards and 6 touchdowns on the ground. He has excelled in Texas A&M's offense and now will hope to lead them to a win against Miami, and it sounds like he's coming back for the 2026 season as well. The Ole Miss Rebels quarterback was originally supposed to be Austin Simmons, but after he got hurt, Trinidad Chamblas would take over. He went to Forest Hills Northern High School in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and after throwing for 1,600 yards and 17 touchdowns, he would end up at Ferris State. Unfortunately for him, he was stuck at the D2 level, but as a junior last season, he ended up throwing for 3,000 yards and 26 scores, had over 1,000 yards rushing, and led Ferris State to a national championship victory. He became a finalist for the Harlan Hill Trophy, and then decided to enter the spring portal. He would settle on Ole Miss, and ended up getting a chance to start after the Austin Simmons injury. So far this year, Chamblas has passed for over 3,000 yards and 18 touchdowns, with 470 rushing yards and 6 scores. Chamblas has had an incredible season, and I guess he's applying for an extra year, but I don't know if he'll get it. Another guy who came out of the state of Michigan was Dante Moore. Going to MLK High School, he got offered while he was in middle school, and he ended up throwing for 3,000 yards and 40 touchdowns during his junior season, and then had 2,300 yards and 32 touchdowns during his senior season. In total, he had just under 10,000 yards and 135 scores, and became a 5-star recruit. He would flip from Oregon to UCLA, where he didn't do that well during his freshman year. Moore ended up passing for 1,600 yards and 11 touchdowns, and decided to transfer back up to Oregon, where he'd be a backup in 2024 behind Dylan Gabriel. In his first year as a starter, Moore has now thrown for 2,700 yards and 24 touchdowns, and has been really efficient. Oregon's the number 5 team in the nation, and many believe he'll declare for the 2026 NFL Draft. Back in the class of 2021, Baron Morton was a top 15 quarterback recruit and the 104th best player nationally, coming out of Eastland High School. Baron Morton had put up ridiculous numbers while he was in high school, as he had thrown for 3,613 yards and 37 touchdowns with 19 more on the ground as a senior. As I said, he ended up at Texas Tech, where he has gotten better each and every year in Lubbock. He threw for 1,000 yards in 2022, 1,800 in 2023, 3,300 in 2024, and now this year, he's thrown for 2,600 yards and 22 touchdowns. He also only has 4 interceptions, but he was dealing with a bit of an injury, so that's why his numbers are a little bit down. He has nearly 10,000 total yards of offense at Texas Tech, and leads them to one of their best seasons in school history, and they're hoping to make a deep run before he goes off to the NFL. If you're going to talk about a guy who had an insane high school career, let's talk about Gunnar Stockton. This guy truly put up video game numbers while he was at Rabun County High School in Georgia, and his family was all Georgia Bulldogs. In total, he ended up throwing for 13,562 yards and 177 touchdowns, with 4,400 yards and 77 touchdowns on the ground. Stockton was originally a 5-star recruit who had committed to South Carolina, but would later flip to Georgia and became a 4-star. Like Carson Beck, Gunnar sat for a couple of seasons before taking over in the second half of the SEC Championship game in 2024 and starting against Notre Dame. This year he's become the full-time starter, throwing for just under 2,700 yards and 23 scores, with 442 yards and 8 touchdowns on the ground. Gunnar has helped Georgia get to a number 3 overall seed and will likely come back in 2026. At number 2 for the Ohio State Buckeyes, we have quarterback Julian Seyan. Coming out of Carlsbad High School, he was always somewhat of a prodigy, as his older brother ended up playing Ivy League football, and when he was in just 4th grade, he was training. He slowly became a better recruit, and at one point became the number 1 quarterback recruit in the country. While he was at Carlsbad, he threw for 7,800 yards and 85 touchdowns and was seen as one of the best recruits in the country. After Nick Saban suddenly retired though, he would transfer to Ohio State and became the backup in 2024. This season, he's been incredible as he's thrown for 3,323 yards with 31 touchdowns and 6 picks. He's also completed 79% of his passes. Seyan has been pretty incredible, has had help from 2 great receivers, and will hope to lead Ohio State to a 2nd straight national championship. I feel like I've told the Fernando Mendoza story 100 times now, but coming out of Christopher Columbus High School in Miami, he ended up throwing for 1,400 yards and 16 touchdowns as a senior and was a 2-star recruit committed to Yale. He ended up getting a late offer to go to Cal, where he sat his first year, before then throwing for 1,700 yards and 14 touchdowns as a sophomore. During his junior season, he threw for 3,000 yards and 16 touchdowns, and looking to get better, he decided to transfer, where he ended up joining his brother in Bloomington, Indiana, to be the starter at IU. They needed a new quarterback after Curtis Rourke, and so far Fernando has been insane. He's thrown for just under 3,000 yards and 33 touchdowns, and has ran for 6 more scores. He is perfect for Cignetti's offense, led them to a perfect 13-0 record, and will probably win the Heisman at this point. Fernando is an incredible player, and will hope to put the cherry on top of IU's special season. So yeah, today we talked about the starting quarterback for every playoff team, and what do you think? Who is the best quarterback on this list? Who is the most underrated? And what topic should I cover next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and check out my videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.